the idyllic villages that cling to our coastline.
This is absolutely breathtaking.
Known for their beauty.
To approach under sail like this is just thrilling.
And serenity.
It's a snapshot of a period that we've now lost.
Now destinations for our leisure. But once they played a vital role in the history of our island nation.
I can't believe this is actually happening.
Oh, wow. We've got a lunar landscape there.
It's incredibly important in terms of our heritage, and it's all happening here.
I'm Ben Robinson, and as an archaeologist, I'm fascinated by our coastal villages. Now, Bamburgh is famous for this splendid castle, but I want to find out what it was really like to live in the shadow of this formidable building.
Bamburgh is in Northumberland, 20 miles south of the Scottish border. For over 1,000 years, the health and fortunes of the villagers have been shaped by those in charge at the castle. We'll uncover the secrets of a 7th century village burial ground.
They found skeletons. They're very healthy, but their teeth were dreadful.
We search for a lost well named after a founder of English Christianity.
Could this be the ancient Aiden's well that we know nothing about today?
And discover an early welfare state in the village, long before one existed nationally.
This is actually the centre of a number of provisions for the poor of the parish, with some really cutting-edge technologies.
There's a fascinating story to this village by the sea.
Approaching Bamburgh, my skipper is Billy Shiel, whose family have been running boat trips across this beautiful stretch of the Northumberland coast since 1918.
Picked a good day for it.
Yeah, the sea's flat, conditions are good.
And what about landing there? You can't land me on the beach today.
We'll get close in, we'll all get close into Bamburgh, we'll get a good look at the castle, you know, and of course the village is hidden by the dunes.
It's such a privileged view. I'm seeing it in a way that mariners have seen it for hundreds and hundreds of years. So what aids have you got today to help navigation?
We've got satellite, we've got radar, if the conditions don't allow.
And you've got mobile phones as well.
Of course, the mobile phone, yes. That's Mrs. Shield telling us my tea's ready.
As we draw closer, it's still not easy to spot the village.
This is a stunning view. The great castle there at Bamburgh, sitting on its outcrop of rock, surveying the land around, dominating the land around, and dominating the little village there, which I can just see a few houses clustered behind the dunes. Now, it's easy to think on a day like today, the sun shining, no wind, golden sands, that life here must have been great for the villagers all through history. But we know that wasn't the case. They lived through hard times. And I'm trying to find out how the village coped, how it survived, how it persisted and thrived.
Today's village is a holiday haven, a feast for the eyes, with traditional cottages and buckets of charm. To understand the roots of this village, we need to look to the castle. Built on top of a steep volcanic rock in the 6th century, it offered a strong defensive position to the early kings of the north.
But long before there was a castle here, there was another kind of fortification, a burh or a borough. And Bamburgh takes its name from the 7th century ruler Ethelthryth's wife, Bebba.
Graham Young is the resident archaeologist researching this early medieval fortress and the village that grew around it.
Hi there, Graham. Am I interrupting?
Nothing that's urgent.
Yes, in other words. So you're laying out where you're going to be excavating next?
Yes, somewhere just behind where Paul is standing, we think is the foundations of a medieval tower.
And from this spot, I'm getting a real sense of how difficult this place was to attack. I mean, it's such a steep climb up there.
It is, and this is the easy way in.
But do you have any indication of what that early fortress would have looked like?
The original fortress would have been timber. We actually, in one of our trenches, have what we think is evidence of the timber phase of defence.
This early community at Bamburgh is contained within the fortress.
The higher status people definitely are. From our trenches, we think that the lower lying areas of the palace are where the artisans are working, the high status metalsmiths, mostly iron, but they're working gold as well. So we think it's probably weapons, swords and armour for the royal court. And beyond that, you've probably got crops and such like going on in the agricultural heartland around the fortress. So it's obviously, there's a real sense of hierarchy as you come down slope.
Thanks to an amazing discovery, Graham's colleague Jessica Turner has been able to research Bamburgh's 7th century residents. It's incredibly rare to have evidence of village life this early.
There was a massive rumour in Bamburgh that there was a Viking burial ground here in the sand dunes. But when Bamburgh Research Project came looking, they did not find longboats, and they did not find garnets, and they did not find helmets. They found single inhumations, so single skeletons lying flat, east-west. That automatically tells you it's a Christian burial site.
Interesting, not pagan Vikings, but villagers?
Yes, we think they are the courtesans and artisans of the royal court. We've got a skeleton of a female. She has a condition that you'd call a weaver's bottom, which is where the glutamus maximus hits the top of the femur. And it's basically from continually getting up and down and crouching. But added to that is she had a small nick in her tooth from continually holding a needle or thread. So that's suggesting she was here. She was a seamstress or a weaver for the royal court.
Amazing. Usually you'd expect a population of that time to show quite a lot of evidence of malnourishment. What was this population like? How well fed and watered were they?
They're robust, they're very healthy, which suggests a good diet. Their teeth were dreadful, absolutely appalling teeth. Again, probably indicative of a really good diet. So lots of honey, lots of mead. And then from the archaeological evidence from in the castle, we know that they have a very rich sort of cattle-based beef diet rather than the natural seafood that's just there in front of them.
Is there any other evidence, any other indication of who these people actually were?
So the enamel on your teeth holds the mineral trace of the environment in which that person grew up. And the evidence suggests that 1,400 years ago, people were coming from all over Britain, but also continental Europe as well, to come to Bamburgh.
This diverse community may have been drawn to the area by a radical new religion, Christianity. In the early 7th century, at the request of King Oswald, St Aidan, an inspiring preacher, founded his first church here. People came from far and wide to hear him speak.
King Oswald and Aidan converted all the Northumbrians to Christianity, to the Celtic Christianity, and Aidan was given Lindisfarne to set up his monastery on. So it's really incredibly important in terms of our Christian heritage of this country, and it's all happening here.
And there's a chance that these people would have actually known these figures, these saints, these kings.
Yes, the site is remarkable in itself, but then you can take that little step further and you can make this actual links to the Celtic, the northern Christian saints.
The Bamburgh bones are a significant archaeological discovery. In a fitting tribute, they were reinterred at the village church, St Aidan's, the man who may have inspired them to come here.
Wowee, look at this. Proper crypt, this, isn't it?
It's a beauty, isn't
yeah,
it?
Look at that rib vaulting. Where are the bodies?
If you go through that gate there and look through that grille.
Round here?
Yep.
Oh my goodness me. I didn't expect that. And this brings home that these were real lives, these were real people. Sometimes people think that archaeology can be a bit abstract and bones are bones. No, they're people. And this was a very special community in a very, very special place. And it just seems entirely fitting, the care with which they've been laid to rest again here.
Over the next 5 centuries, the castle was kept as a base for the kings and queens of England, and the village continued to grow and thrive.
By the 13th century, the castle has acquired a large stone keep, and it's beginning to take on the sort of appearance that it has today. But the population is starting to outgrow the confines of the defences. So here in Bamburgh, an entirely new castle village is laid out.
And that medieval planning can still be seen today. There's a long straight road leading directly from the castle to the village.
And from that road would have been laid out property plots. And I can see evidence of those here. Now, the houses have all been renewed over time, but they occupy the same sites as the medieval houses. And they're really crowded together, one after another, cheek by jowl. This was the principal street, so they're sort of jostling for space.
Each plot was a long, thin strip of land. Known as burgages, they each fronted the main street, but with yards and space to grow crops behind. 13th century villagers didn't own these houses. Rent was due to the castle.
Now, the main street goes off up there, but another street comes in from that direction.
The 2 roads form a V shape, leaving a triangle of valuable land in the middle.
In fact, it's the classic village green. You've got to imagine those trees stripped away, not gone. We're talking about a flat, green, open space. And on that green area, you would have had markets, you would have had fairs, village gatherings, proclamations, justice would have been dispensed there, the stocks. Perhaps the animals would have been brought in on occasion to be corralled there. It was a safe place to keep them so the whole village could look out on their livestock. Absolutely classic village green, that.
If the castle marks one end of the village, another building marked the other, a Dominican friary founded in 1265. The Dominicans liked to mix with the world and preferred large settlements. Building here shows just how much importance they placed on Bamburgh. But now the main clues to its existence are in this back garden.
I'm looking for traces of this medieval past, of the original friary, and there's a lump of masonry up there that looks interesting. And it's clearly old, it's medieval. Maybe it's a column or a pier, but no, there looks to be a glazing groove up there, so maybe it's part of a very large window. This could have been part of the friary church. Ah, but this is interesting. That looks like the original medieval wall attached to this great lump of masonry. Yes, and I can trace it. Here it is, all the way to here. And then the later garden wall has been built right on top of it, on the original line. And then these are later farm buildings. That door interests me. That's fairly early. I think you could be talking easily 16th century for that door head. And look at the ventilators there, these narrow little slits. This is an old barn, and it's on exactly the same line as that lump of medieval masonry right there, and the wall coming from it. It's on exactly the same line. This could be another part of the monastic complex, another part of the friary complex.
The castle and the friary were of great benefit to the 13th century village. Both provided employment, and their great walls gave protection and spiritual guidance. However, for all to thrive, one resource in particular was vital.
One of the most important things to sustain village life was a clean source of water. Probably the most important thing.
In the medieval period, old records tell us that the village had 3 main wells, but the location of one of them, named after St Aidan himself, Aidan's Well, is lost. Village historian Carol Griffiths has used 18th century maps to locate a structure once called the Kiln Well. Could this also be the lost Aidan's Well?
Ben, I can't believe that this is actually happening. It's the end of a 10-year search for me.
Today she'll see inside it for the first time. But just how old is it?
You sound pretty confident that this is the one.
It took years of research, but I couldn't find out where it was until a colleague, volunteer that I was working with, discovered this map, which shows the layout of what were still the medieval fields and closes, albeit in the 18th century. And right in the centre of the village is a close called the Kilnwell Close. Could this be the ancient Aiden's Well that was mentioned in the 1300s that we know nothing about today, with St Aidan's Church being just over the road? I can't believe that I'm actually going to peer into the depths of it.
We've still got quite a lot of work to do because that looks like a hefty lid.
I'll tell you what, Ben, I'll supervise the top coming off. You can give the fellas a hand.
I'll go and get some kit. Oh my goodness! It's off. Let's get it onto this wood. Now watch your fingers, for goodness sake. Down, one. Oh my goodness. Good heavens above. Oh, I can see the water down there. This is a mega structure.
Ben,
Carol,
can I come and have a look?
at it. Yeah, but don't get too close, Carol, but you should be able to see.
Oh.
Just watch your foot here.
Wow.
Look at that.
Moses.
People find wells and holes in villages that they want to explore, and I've read an account that says, so we lowered a small boy down on a rope to find out what was at the bottom, and we don't want a small boy on a rope.
You don't have a small boy to hand.
But we've got a little camera, so this will give us a little bit of an insight. On the tablet there, you should start seeing some images.
Let me.
It does look like this pecked, roughly dressed stone at the top here carries on all the way down. There's tooling marks on them.
Golly.
Hang on, look, I'm coming down. Do you see that? There's a timber there. See that old timber?
How ancient is that?
Very ancient. The timber was obviously bigger, but it's been eroded. There's also some modern pipes coming out of the same thing. But you see, they've got a slot there for these timbers.
Absolutely.
They're going to be part of the original construction or some consolidation later on. But those timbers look really, really old.
Right.
Really old.
Could this have been Aiden's Well?
It's very, very difficult to say from what I'm seeing, but there's no reason why a solid construction like this in stone couldn't be that old. I mean, it clearly is very old and very, very well constructed. This is something that did serve a large population, like the whole village.
Yes.
It's massive. But who built it? Well, it's someone of means, it's someone of wealth. This is state-of-the-art well construction. This wouldn't be out of place in a castle or a monastery.
But who commissioned it? That's my next bit of research, Ben. You've set me going now.
The village had always benefited from a close connection to the royal castle, but it was badly damaged in the Wars of the Roses, and the land was sold by the Crown. A clue as to what happened next lies in the houses of Bamburgh.
The village is solidly medieval in layout, but most of the older historic properties are actually 18th and 19th century in date, and the castle is clearly no longer a ruin. So obviously there's been more investment here.
So what happened here in the 18th century to warrant new investment in Bamburgh? The answer lies in the will of the then castle owner, Nathaniel Crewe.
When he died with no heir in 1721, he left instructions for his fortune to form the Crewe Trust, and that would prove incredibly beneficial to the village of Bamburgh.
In 1758, Dr. John Sharp became a trustee, and with the income Crewe's estate was generating, he pioneered an early version of a welfare state, nearly 200 years before a national welfare state.
John was Archdeacon of Northumberland. He was well educated, he was wealthy, and he was liberal. he directs the trust to repair the castle and then starts thinking about innovations that will improve the lives of the villagers and the poor of the village.
Sharp's first initiative saw him commission one building in particular.
Now, you might think on a castle I'm looking at some sort of defensive tower, but not a medieval defensive tower, because they didn't tend to taper in quite this way. See how it's narrower at the top than it is at the bottom. You might think near the coast, is it a lighthouse? Well, unbelievably, this started life as a windmill. It's in a very windy spot. It's obviously going to catch the wind. They've sited it right at the end of this little promontory here, so that guarantees that the sails are going to turn. The cap's gone, the sails are gone. This is a tower mill.
In the late 18th century, a boom in the population and a succession of poor harvests meant corn prices doubled. People were struggling to survive. To help, Sharp opened a castle granary and sold corn at a reduced rate, and the windmill supplied cheap flour so the villagers could make bread.
There are records of people queuing up here at 3 o'clock in the morning to benefit from that subsidised corn. But sadly, not everyone who was queuing was entitled to it. There are instances of people giving false names, saying they're one person, when in fact they're another. There are instances of people collecting corn who weren't entitled to it. An early version of benefits fraud.
Sharp's benevolence continued. Concerned by the lack of health care near Bamburgh, he opened a state-of-the-art free hospital here in 1772.
Oh, wow. What a place.
It's really something, isn't it?
Dr. Sarah Fox is an expert in 18th century health.
So this is the site of an infirmary, a hospital where the people of Bamburgh could come to be treated. And it was a hospital with some really cutting-edge technologies. So most Georgian hospitals and infirmaries were found in urban areas. Lots of people to treat, lots of urban poor. And what was really unusual about the infirmary here at Bamburgh was that it was for the benefit of the people in the parish in a very rural location.
In the 18th century, there was a leap in our understanding of the human body. But in practice, medicine was still a little experimental.
So there were different treatments depending on whether you came to the dispensary or the infirmary. But you might also come here to see the surgeons, which was a much more gruesome prospect. There was no anaesthetic available. Your surgeon had to work quickly because otherwise they would lose their patients to shock or blood loss. And that restricted the kind of operations that they could do. So the amputations was the key one. They were skilled at removing things like tumours or growths that were on the body. And they also performed lithotomies, which is where they removed stones from the urinary tract using gruesome instruments and incisions in places you probably don't want to think about then.
Yes, doesn't bear thinking about, does it? How cutting edge were the treatments here? Was it just country doctors bumbling along?
So Bamburgh's really fascinating in that regard because it was connected with some of the most eminent physicians in the country at the time. So John Sharp's brother, William Sharp, was a well-thought-of London surgeon who eventually became surgeon to George III. So Bamburgh was tied into these networks of real exciting medical innovation at the time.
The brothers were close. In 1772, William gifted the infirmary a valuable sedan chair. It was used to transport patients to Bamburgh's pioneering sea bathing machines.
Water treatments really were very popular in the Georgian period, and sea bathing was a really important therapy for kind of reviving bodies and for healing. So we have a portrait here of John Sharp. His left hand is resting on some plans for the infirmary. This is a common trope in portraits of this time, that you see the kind of great worthy Georgian gentleman with one hand resting on the plans for their huge 18th century pile. Here we have John Sharp really wanting to be remembered for the infirmary and the care that he provided here.
Dr. John's charity campaigns were boundless. He set up a nightly patrol for shipwreck survivors and commissioned the world's first patented lifeboat. At the castle, he established a free school for boys and girls, and he didn't stop there.
In addition to the schemes running at the castle, the village itself was beginning to get a makeover. the trust rents out the housing to 2 tenants and they begin to invest in repairs and refurbishments. These 2 cottages here, the records show that they got new frontages, they got repairs, they got remodelled. Just having a look here, I'm looking for clues about what sort of works were taking place. The thing that strikes me immediately is these cottages are 2 very different buildings. They're not the same, they're different sizes. Look at this though, the ridge line is exactly the same on both buildings, and both have got pan-tiled roofs. That would be entirely right for the 18th century. That would have been a bit of an innovation here.
Clearly the roof has been renovated, but what clues can I find inside?
Well, that's a big, big fireplace. Look at that. But this is a smallish room. It almost would have overpowered this room. So that makes me wonder whether originally the room was much larger on this floor. We've got some joists here, and that seems to be about right for the date, 18th century. I'm just following the joists through. One there, one there. I think this is probably a later partition. Oh, look at this here. Yeah, there's a joist running through there. So probably this is more like one of the original walls. That would make sense, actually, a bigger room. And then there's just a hint in the wall here. You can just see this shadow, this slight in relief there. Maybe a door. I mean, a doorway doesn't make sense unless the 2 buildings were joined at one point. I'm just beginning to wonder whether originally the right-hand side, the building we're in now, was virtually taken down and built up again. So we've lost that symmetry in the facade, created a new cottage here, left the older one tinkered with, but more or less standing as it was. This is not like building a row of new estate cottages. They're kind of making do with what they've got and working with the existing buildings.
There's no doubt that Sharp's mini welfare state brought great relief to the people of Bamburgh, and Georgian society certainly sat up and took note. In 1776, author William Hutchinson said, "Sharp has an eye upon every new channel by which he may give relief or consolation to his suffering fellow creatures." A truly inspiring man.
From the earliest times, the communities here at Bamburgh have benefited from living under progressive regimes. Firstly, the early Christian kings of Northumbria, and then the creation of a mini welfare state in the late 18th century. And the heart of it all has always been the castle. And the castle's more important than ever today, helping to draw people in and providing a livelihood and well-being for this village by the sea.